Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. The finals are finally here. We have a game in the books, and it is the Phoenix Suns who have taken a 1-0 lead over the Milwaukee Bucks. Before the game, everybody sort of got a little bit of a surprise, a nice surprise, in that Giannis Antetokounmpo was able to go and play in the game, which I feel like makes it a much more exciting and interesting series. And frankly, he played pretty well. In fact, he did a great impression of Sap's favorite player, LeBron James, with an incredible block, and I believe it was the second quarter. But it wasn't enough to keep the Bucks in the game at the end, and Phoenix takes a 1-0 lead. Sap, what were just your early impressions of this series?
I thought Giannis looked about 85%. Now, will he get better as the series goes on? That's likely because after game two, then we go through a stretch where there's a game every 3 days, right? So you've got Tuesday, Thursday in Phoenix. Then you don't have game three till Sunday. Game four is then Wednesday. And then game five is the following Saturday, followed by Tuesday if we get to game six. And then game seven would be on Thursday. So it's spread out when you look at games 3, 4, 5, and 6. If it goes that far, there's going to be multiple days between those games. They're really stretching this out. I think part of it is that less than a week from now is going to be the Major League Baseball All-Star game on a Tuesday night. So rather than compete with that, the finals will be on Wednesday instead of Tuesday. So it's kind of stretched out, which could help Giannis get healthier with that left knee. I thought he looked okay. Wasn't as explosive as he normally is. So he should be better in game two. My takeaways from this were that the Phoenix Suns are a slightly better team than Milwaukee Bucks. I think they're much more efficient on offense because they really are set up in a classical way, right? I mean, there's not a lot of teams in the NBA now that have a true point guard like Chris Paul, a great wing slasher like Devin Booker, and then a true big man in DeAndre Ayton. And it seems to all work together. Those guys combined for 81 points. They were efficient, did everything they needed to do. They're just, I think, a better squad than Milwaukee. That being said, I still expect this series to go 6-7 games. I know people are now saying, well, it's going to be a sweep because Giannis played. He played pretty well, and they still couldn't win that game. Well, I would think some of the Bucks are going to play better in games 2, 3, 4, however far this thing goes. And we'll see if Mike Budenholzer makes adjustments that he sometimes is very slow to make. I think you may see more of Giannis in the 5 spot, and it's going to cost Brook Lopez some time on the court because Milwaukee really had trouble defending the pick and roll of the Phoenix Suns. And one of the difficulties of defending the pick and roll against Phoenix is Devin Booker and Chris Paul are very comfortable taking mid-range jumpers. A lot of times in the pick and roll, it's either the ball handler wants to get to the basket or have an alley-oop to the big man or set up a three-point shooter. Well, Devin Booker and Chris Paul are comfortable in that 14, 16, 17-foot range, and we saw what Chris Paul did last night. He picked up right where he left off in Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals. That's going to be the big thing, is how can Milwaukee defend that pick and roll?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily convinced that Phoenix is definitively a better team. Maybe with Giannis hurt, they are, but I feel like it's just the coaching advantage reared its head last night, and that is what maybe puts Phoenix over the top. Is they're certainly more well coached, because Chris Paul killed Milwaukee last night, and there was just no real game plan to stop him other than putting him continuously in one-on-one. And I thought Drew Holiday would be a little bit more effective one-on-one with Chris Paul. Clearly, he wasn't last night. So I if Milwaukee is to make an adjustment, and as you mentioned, Budenholzer is not necessarily quick to do that. I think the adjustment is, let's key in on Chris Paul. Let's, if Devin Booker beats us or DeAndre Ayton beats us, okay, you know what? We live with it. But Devin Booker hasn't been shooting all that well recently. And so, I take my chances with that and say, we're not going to let Chris Paul just get to his spot every single time and hit that little mid-ranger that he loves. We're just not going to let him do it. We'll double team him. We'll jam him, frustrate him. Whatever you have to do. I think Milwaukee needs to say, we're not going to let this guy beat us. If the other guys beat us, the other guys beat us, but not Chris Paul. So I think that's the big adjustment if I'm Milwaukee that I make. And yeah, I'd say Giannis is, I would say between 70 and 80%. I mean, the scoring wasn't there. The rebounds were clearly there last time. I mean, he had 17 of them. 20 points though. He was pretty efficient, 6 of 11 from the floor. 11 is a very low number for field goal attempts for him typically. So I agree with you, and I think that the format of the finals being a little bit more spread out is definitely to Giannis's and Milwaukee's advantage here. But I do think that Milwaukee, with just some adjustments, can make this a lot more competitive. But the key for me is just don't let Chris Paul do what he did last night, which was 12 of 19, 4 of 7 from 3, 32 points, 9 assists, 4 rebounds. He was pretty much unbothered.
Yeah, exactly. He was very, very comfortable. You have to make him uncomfortable. It's similar to football when the great quarterback, whether it's Brady or Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, when they're comfortable in the pocket and they get to set up in their spot, they are going to pick you apart. What defenses normally do in the NFL is, okay, we know Brady likes to throw from this position or Rodgers likes to throw from this position. Let's get them off that spot. Make them a little uncomfortable. Same thing with Chris Paul, because he's probably the closest thing to a quarterback in the NBA, right? I mean, he kind of gives off that vibe as a leader. He's the guy who sets up everyone. He's a pass-first point guard, although the last 2 games he's been putting up a ton of points. I mean, if Chris Paul's going to go out and get 32 points, 9 assists every night, the Milwaukee Bucks aren't going to win, because that means that he's scoring points, also setting up other guys. So you got to get him off his spot. That's a great point, Jet. Again, you're not shutting this guy down. He's not what he used to be in terms of an explosive offensive player, but he kind of gets to where he wants to go, almost the way Paul Pierce used to. Remember, Paul Pierce would be covered, guarded, and you'd say, well, this guy should be able to, really contain him. And next thing you know, Paul Pierce would make some sort of move, free up his shooting hand, and end up with a fairly open shot, mid-range, make it. Chris Paul does a lot of those same things without even elevating, and he's only about 5'11 and a half. So you're right. They've got to get him uncomfortable in that situation, because if you're going to take down what I think is a slightly better team, I don't think they're a lot better than Milwaukee, a slightly better team, you got to take down the head of the snake, and the head of the snake is Chris Paul.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it didn't look like, and for the most part, it didn't look like Phoenix was, laboring all that much. They kind of did everything that they wanted to do. The Bucks didn't really present all that much in terms of different looks and challenging them. Phoenix offensively was able to just sort of play within themselves and their game plan. And I mean, you can expect DeAndre Ayton's always going to have a very efficient night because he plays in the post and he's got soft hands and he's got a nice touchdown low. And Chris Paul, if you let him just get to a spot, like I said, he's going to be incredibly efficient too. So that's why you have to sort of, when you have 3 guys who can score, you have to try to pick your poison and say, okay, which one of these guys are we going to really key in on and not let do his thing? And Milwaukee didn't do that last night. They said, well, let's try one-on-one with all these guys. Well, that didn't work. And that's why, the 7-game series format is interesting, is because you can see what works and what doesn't work, and you lose a game and the whole series isn't over just because you lose a game. It's not football where you're one and done. So the experimentation does come into play in the format. Now, obviously, you don't have that much time to dick around and figure out what you're doing, but you can afford. They could lose one game in Phoenix and still be okay here if they're able to adjust competitively for the next game. Now, Sep, do you think it's an issue for Phoenix going forward? And I know it sounds strange saying an issue for Phoenix because they're up 1-0 and they look great last night, but now Devin Booker has gone about 4 or 5 games in a row where he has not shot the ball well. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, he hasn't been as efficient as he normally is. It's got to be the injury, right? Because in game 1 against the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, he had a 40-point triple-double. He looked like by far the best player on the court. And then in game 2, he had his nose broken by Patrick Beverley, and he hasn't shot the ball as effectively. Didn't wear the mask last night, so I'm sure he's still laboring at some point with that. I don't care how tough he is, which I think he is. I think he's a tough-minded player, a real competitor. When you still have that type of injury, it's not easy to deal with. That's like having a toothache, right? It's always going to be there. If you bite the wrong way or you put the wrong thing on that tooth, it's going to sting. Same thing with that type of injury that Devin Booker's dealing with.
Yeah, and breathing is an issue with the broken nose.
That's also another thing too. Yeah, so he hasn't looked quite what he's been, but he still competes out there because he'll play good defense. He'll make the right pass. He's not going to run away from the moment. So, I mean, he still had a decent game last night, not as efficient as you would like, but Chris Paul kind of picked up the slack for that with his efficiency, and DeAndre Ayton just continues to impress. It seems like every game I'm more impressed with DeAndre Ayton. I'm seeing Robert Parrish reincarnated here. It's just the same way Parrish used to play. He would beat his opponents down the court. He could shoot mid-range. DeAndre Ayton's got a nice little, 6, 8, 10-foot game where he can go with the jump hook or the quick turnaround. He's also really aggressive going to the basket, keeps his hands up high, is a sensational rebounder, excellent defender. I just see Robert Parrish and DeAndre Ayton. Of course, I see Isaiah Thomas and Chris Paul, and I see a lot of Ray Allen and, Devin Booker. It might explain why this team is 3 wins away from being the world champions when you're talking about,
those are three Hall of Fame players.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, I know a lot of people compared Booker to Kobe. I won't go that far.
No,
he reminds me more of Ray Allen, the way he moves without the basketball, the way he can create his own shot. He's not as good a three-point shooter as Ray Allen. I think he's a little bit better going to the basket than Ray Allen. My point being, his style of play is very similar to Ray Allen. So, got those 3 guys playing at that high level. Mikal Bridges is becoming a really good 3-and-D guy. At that position. Jay Crowder was god-awful last night. He scored 1 point. In fact, he was the only Sun that missed a free throw. They were 25 of 26 from the free throw line. Jay Crowder was the only one that missed. But he's a streaky shooter anyway. And look, Cam Johnson and Cam Payne, they've come off the bench and done great work. Cam Johnson, it just never appears like he misses a shot. And he's always a guy who, when the other team's making some sort of comeback, he always seems to hit a big 3 to kind of calm that down a little bit, or make a steal from Giannis when Milwaukee was trying to close that gap, midway through the fourth quarter. Those 2 guys off the bench have been sensational. And again, I give the coaching edge to Phoenix. Although, as much as we've kind of dumped on Mike Budenholzer, we do have to look and say that they've come back from slow starts in the previous 2 series, right? They were down 2-0 against Brooklyn, came back to win 4 of the final 5 to win that series. They lost game 1 to Atlanta, came back and won that series in 6, including the last 2 games without Giannis. So it just seems like he's slower to make these adjustments. I also think if Phoenix wins the first 2 games, I don't see them losing 4 out of 5 to Milwaukee the way that Brooklyn did, because quite frankly, Phoenix is healthy. Brooklyn was not. James Harden was really never a factor in that series. And Kyrie got hurt in game 4. So, I mean, unless there's an injury concern with Phoenix, I don't think they're going to lose 4 out of the last 5 games if that's going to be necessary for Milwaukee to win the title.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Milwaukee, you're obviously, split is very, very important here, and I think you're thinking, even though the score looked lopsided at the end, and especially the second half, it was virtually all Phoenix. They really took over and then just sort of coasted. I think that you look at 2 things that you can say, okay, we can do this and we'll have a very good chance of winning. One is, like I said, key in on Chris Paul, bother him. If you can make him have a much less efficient night, then you stand a good chance of winning. And 2, you're hoping that Giannis continues to get back on the flow of the game. And if he was 6 of 11 the other night, if you get that number closer to 20, okay, maybe there's 10 more points there, and suddenly you're talking about a much more competitive game. So I think those 2 things are very doable. I don't think that they're they're Herculean tasks. I think that defensively, Milwaukee has the players to be able to bother Chris Paul should they focus in on him defensively. And Giannis, we expect to, just continue to figure things out and get better. I'm not saying, the key's, a natural student of the game who understands all the nuances of it, but I just think he's such an imposing physical player that he will get better as the series goes on because of the gaps, as you mentioned, Seth, between the games. So those 2 things are what I look at as Milwaukee can say, okay, well, we lost game 1, but these are 2 things that we can really think about that give us a pretty good chance in this series still.
The only thing that's difficult to put together here is that Milwaukee shot 44% from 3 last night. Are they going to do that again in this series? Because they've been god-awful shooting from 3 throughout the postseason. So they kind of wasted a good shooting night last night, shooting 44% from 3. They out-rebounded Phoenix. So those are 2 things that if Milwaukee continues to do that, they'll be in really good shape. The biggest difference in this game, Jet, was Phoenix 25 of 26 from the free throw line, Milwaukee 9 of 16. Milwaukee didn't go to the free throw line as much as Phoenix, and they certainly didn't make the free throws at the same rate that the Phoenix Suns did. That's the difference in the game. You're talking a 16-point difference at the free throw line. What was the final score? 118-105, a 13-point difference. I mean, if you get those numbers closer, you may have that much closer a game. And also the fact that I know some national pundits, Skip Bayless, is saying that Milwaukee's better without Giannis. Well, Giannis played 35 minutes last night. In those 35 minutes, he was a +1. In the 13 minutes that he didn't play, the Bucks were -14. Now, I'm not a huge plus-minus guy. I think there's a lot of other factors that go into that. But when Giannis was on the court, they battled Phoenix pretty evenly, right? I mean, a +1 means they won the battle in those 35 minutes. The other 13 minutes, they were -14. So now is Giannis going to play much more than that? He's coming off this injury. Generally, he's not a guy that's going to play 48 minutes. The Bucks like to use their depth, but this is the finals. And with those big gaps, coming up after game 2, that could probably help the Bucks and have Giannis play closer to 44, 42 minutes per game, provided that knee is improving.
Yeah, no, the without Giannis argument is so stupid that I won't even, engage in it.
Yeah.
And it's just Skip Bayless doing, what he does, and anybody else who's taking it seriously just doesn't
Skip
understand
was trying
basketball.
Skip this morning was trying to say that Tom Brady was better than Aaron Rodgers in the match yesterday, which is absurd. Aaron Rodgers was the best golfer on that golf course yesterday, including Bryson DeChambeau and Phil Mickelson.
I'm not going to lie to you, Sepp. I watched 0 seconds of that.
I was glued to the TV for the most part. It was fun to watch.
Could not bring myself to do it. I was just, getting ready I was just getting hyped for the finals all day long. I didn't want any distractions. Before we get to actually what was a pretty fun day in sports yesterday, Sap, there is just a quick injury update for this final series. Unfortunately, Dario Saric tore his ACL in that game, so he is done for the rest of the series and probably a good part of next season too.
Yeah.
Do you see that impacting this series one way or the other at all, Sap?
He's been averaging 12 to 14 minutes per game, backing up DeAndre Ayton. And I think Ayton's effective playing 34, 36 minutes. So they're going to have to figure out some things to do there. Because Milwaukee could go with a huge lineup if they so choose, with Lopez and Giannis, who always start, and you could put Portis in there or PJ Tucker, have Middleton and Drew Holiday in the backcourt. That's a big team. So
they're
it could be a problem
team
on the boards. They're a huge team. I mean, they can really go big on you. And Phoenix is more of a smaller finesse team that likes to control tempo. So that could be something. I mean, Saric isn't the player he used to be, but he does give you 12, 14 minutes a night. That could be something to look for going forward. But it seems like Monty Williams is pushing all the right buttons at this point. It just seems like no matter what he does, it seems to work.
Yep. I agree with you. I mean, I think he's done a fantastic job, and we'll see if Budenholzer is up to the task in the finals of being able to make these adjustments. Like I said, I don't think, Sap, that they're, major adjustments that are very complex. I think it's pretty simple. Key in on Chris Paul and see if that helps you. You just can't, if he, like you said, Sap, if he does what he did last night in every game, they will sweep Milwaukee. They'll sweep them.
Yeah, because that's
Chris Paul
so
puts up that
efficient.
same stat line.
Yep. And the other thing with Chris Paul is he doesn't turn the ball over. He just doesn't turn the ball over, which is incredible considering how many assists he has. He's sensational.
One of the best ever at controlling the ball in terms of assist to turnover ratios. I mean, historically great.
Yeah, he's the modern day Isaiah Thomas. I've been saying it for years, and I know the narrative is one of the top 5 point guards of all time. I say yes. Again, it's tough to differentiate sometimes point guards and shooting guards. He's a true point guard. I rank the point guards as Magic 1, Oscar Robertson 2, Steph Curry 3. And again, Steph, he's not a classic point guard, but let's put him there. I put him 3rd. I put Isaiah Thomas 4th and Chris Paul 5th. I mean, I put Chris Paul above, say, Russell Westbrook or Steve Nash, John Stockton, Jason Kidd. I mean, his acumen on the court is at the highest level you'll ever see. I mean, there's probably a half a dozen guys since I've been watching basketball whose IQ off the charts, right? And Chris Paul's one of those guys. LeBron James, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. Those are like the 4 guys I think of who are like so far ahead of everybody from an intellectual standpoint. And I'm not bad-mouthing Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. They had other things that they were better than those guys with, and they were very smart players, but not at the level of those 4 players that I mentioned. Chris Paul is going to be either a great general manager, a great coach, whatever he decides he wants to do after playing. He's been the president of the Players Union for a long period of time. Who the hell knows? Maybe he'll be the next commissioner of basketball for all we know. He's got great leadership ability. You see that this year because it just blows me away how much Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton literally follow him around like little puppy dogs. It's so great because, we know he's had problems with other teams, but it just seems like these two brilliant young players really have decided that they're going to follow Chris Paul's lead, and here they are 3 wins away from winning a championship.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that it's his first season in Phoenix, and so I think that's part of the appeal is that, oh wow, they've got this guy in. We watched him play, when we were kids. We're really intrigued to play with him. The act is still fresh and new, but I think as it goes on, it does wear thin with Chris Paul, and that's why he's been on a bunch of different teams. But for this first season, yeah, it's worked. I mean, it couldn't have worked any better, obviously.
It worked last year in Oklahoma City as well. It's just that they were in a rebuilding process.
Again, first season,
but they were tanking and it worked. I think maybe he's mellowing a little bit, but he also has the right coach with him, and Monty Williams, who coached him in New Orleans. And I think Monty Williams is such a great presence and has so much charisma that all of the players just follow Monty Williams because his story is fascinating. And I think that that's a big part of it as well. I mean, I feel that Monty Williams is a better leader than, say, Mike D'Antoni, who Chris Paul played with for a few years in Houston. We all love Doc Rivers, but Doc's very emotional, and I think that they butted heads quite a bit, where I think Monty Williams is much more of a father figure for Chris Paul than, say, Doc Rivers, even though Doc Rivers is older than Monty Williams. They were very combative.
Could it be that Chris Paul at this stage of his career, it's better for him to work with these younger players as opposed to more contemporaries of him or peers, like a James Harden or Blake Griffin, who are closer in age to Chris Paul. Last year, the Thunder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, very young player. You had a bunch of young guys on the Thunder. And this year, obviously, Booker and Ayton are still very young players. This is their first year, even in the postseason. And look at what they've done. They've gotten all the way to the finals. So maybe it's that, the young players are sort of like in awe of playing with him because, again, he's somebody that they grew up watching and appreciating. And, they're still at the early part of their careers where they're not making massive money and they don't have the cachet that maybe some of the other players that Chris Paul played with and butted heads with in the past is. Blake Griffin was still a massive star in LA, despite maybe being a little bit more limited talent-wise than we thought he would end up being. Same with James Harden, obviously was an MVP. And so I think that those guys who were of similar age to Chris Paul and are making massive money and already accomplished things in the league, his message maybe just didn't resonate with them at all. And they're like, why, this guy needs to just relax and leave me alone. Whereas it's working well for guys who are, younger and still at the beginnings of their career.
I think that's a great point, Jet. I think once you're established, and Blake Griffin probably felt he was a bigger star than Chris Paul. And in some sense, he probably was as a star, never a better basketball player, but, he was winning dunk contests. He was jumping over cars. He's got kind of a powerful game. Chris Paul has more of a cerebral game, but Chris Paul's always been a better player than Blake Griffin. But Blake Griffin probably felt that he was the bigger star than Chris Paul. James Harden, as you said, had that MVP, and felt like he wasn't going to defer to Chris Paul. I always thought that was a weird mix, James Harden with Chris Paul, because to me, Chris Paul's a point guard. He should run your offense, and it seemed like he was a fish out of water playing in that Houston system because it was run more through James Harden. I thought it was a weird fit there. And look, they were successful, right? They probably would have won the title in 2018 if Chris Paul doesn't pull his hamstring in Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals. But I never felt that they really fit together. But this thing is working perfectly. It almost has a similar feel to like Tom Brady going to Tampa, where in walks the greatest quarterback of all time, and everybody just follows his lead. Not that Chris Paul's quite at the level of Tom Brady, but you know what? He's pretty damn good. And again, he's been around now in his 16th year, and he's finally in the finals. And I don't think he's going to lose in this series because I just don't think that he's going to allow it to happen as long as he has something to do about it.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good comparison, the Brady to Tampa Bay. And yeah, obviously Chris Paul is not to his sport what Tom Brady has been to the NFL. But I think, a similar effect in terms of, a bunch into a fresh space with fresh faces who are sort of in awe of you, and the message really resonates. new coach and all that stuff. So I think that's a good comparison, Sap. And speaking of Tom Brady, he was active yesterday, not in a football field, but on a golf course. The match 4, I think it was the 4th edition of this, featured Tom Brady and Phil Mickelson taking on Bryson DeChambeau and your guy, Aaron Rodgers, Sap. DeChambeau and Rodgers won. I did not watch a minute of it. Was it competitive?
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, the pacing was so freaking slow, but it's golf.
People were tweeting about it all day long. It was like it was a 24-hour event. It was insane.
It was 5 hours. It was at least 5 hours, and they didn't even play the final 2 holes because they got 3 up with 2 holes left, so they just stopped playing. The pacing was slow. There were a lot of breaks in between holes. They brought on President Obama for an interview, and the weird thing about that is you can almost sense that Obama and Tom Brady probably don't really like each other. I that's the feeling I got, and I also got the feeling that Mickelson's not a big fan of Obama. I know Mickelson is a Republican, and I'm thinking Brady kind of is in the same vein as Phil Mickelson, whereas I know Rodgers embraced Obama and Obama embraced Rodgers. In fact, Obama said that they had played golf when he was president, and he really enjoyed it. So there were a lot of things. I mean, Charles Barkley was his usual hilarious self. Like, he's got one of the most awkward swings ever, but he loves the sport. And every time I see Charles Barkley doing these other things, obviously he's great on TNT doing the NBA. I'm like hoping the NHL uses him when TNT gets that package. He doesn't know how to skate, I'm sure, or even know the first thing about hockey, but put him in the studio because he'll be really entertaining. Even doing the hockey pre and post game shows on TNT. They've already signed Wayne Gretzky, who I don't think has the personality of Charles Barkley, but then again, no one has the personality of Charles Barkley. But it was a fun event. I tell you, it was picturesque to look at, though. I mean, the scenery in Wyoming was just gorgeous. I mean, I'm assuming that a lot of people today went online and booked flights out there for a vacation because it's spectacular to look at. I mean, you went to school in Oregon, so you saw what the West is like, how gorgeous it is, because quite frankly, there's just not as many people taking up the space that we have here on the East Coast.
No, during the match, they doubled the population of Wyoming, I think, because of those people who were there.
Yes, and the gross national product too, with the 4 guys that were playing, they all get some good money. But Rodgers looked really relaxed. He played great, and they were needling him, especially Brady was, about the NFC Championship game, and also his future in Green Bay. I'm starting to think he's going to go back to Green Bay because these guys were needling him. If I think it was all as serious as a lot of people have made it out to be, he would probably have put the kibosh on that. But I just get the feeling he's going to show up to camp in a couple of weeks and have his last year in Green Bay and then move on after next year.
It doesn't. I mean, to me, it seems like he really doesn't want to. I mean, I think that if he had his druthers, they would just release him and let him go wherever the hell he wanted. But
I would trade him. I mean, it's quite an asset there. The only problem is if you trade him, those draft picks you get back aren't as worth as much because putting Aaron Rodgers on Denver makes them a Super Bowl contender. So instead of drafting, 10th or 12th, they're going to all of a sudden be drafting in the 20s.
Yeah, but it's not the NBA, where you could find, really hugely impactful guys every year in that spot. So if you get a bunch of them, I don't think at this point it's too late to trade him. Teams are in there; they're doing their camps already. They're pretty set. So I don't think
Denver would find space for him though. I mean,
I'm not saying they wouldn't find space. I'm just saying I think his value isn't as high as it should be necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's why he's going to play. He's going to play one more year in Green Bay, and then they'll trade him or whatever the hell happens. Right. I don't think he's going to retire or post Jeopardy. I watched that. Before that, we had Italy against Spain in the Euro semifinals.
That I did watch, which was a tremendous game. We were texting during it. If you appreciate soccer, Italy won that one. So Sap, I mean, what a day for you! You had your guy Aaron Rodgers win the match. You had your Paisans Team Italy win in their semifinal match. I mean, what could have been better?
Great. And then, I was rooting for the Suns in game 1 and in the series. So that worked out. A little bit of bad news today. Roger Federer eliminated in the quarterfinals at Wimbledon by a 6'5" Polish guy with a huge serve.
Can't have it all. Can't have it all.
And Fed's about to turn 40, which is a ridiculous age to be playing competitive tennis. I mean, we talk about Brady being 44 this coming year as a elite quarterback still, but there aren't a lot of 40-year-old tennis players in the history of the sport that go on and win, Grand Slams. Federer got knocked out in the quarterfinals, so that was kind of unfortunate. But it was great for Italy. They're now in the Euro finals, and should be interesting whether they play England or Denmark. As we're recording now, that match is 1-1, 80 minutes in, and I'm rooting for England because I want to see Italy-England because the championship match is being held in England. I think that would be a wild scene.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting. The Euros are fun. There's a lot of great sports on right now, and we will make sure that we have you covered for everything, including Game 2 of the NBA Finals, which is tomorrow, 9:00 Eastern. We will make sure that we are giving you our reactions to that after it happens. Sap, do you want to take a stab at who's going to win that game?
Yeah, I think Phoenix is going to win again. It's a short period between games 1 and 2, so I don't know how much adjustments that Budenholzer will make. I think Booker will have a better game than he had in game 1. I don't think Jay Crowder's going to score 1 point again. He's streaky as all hell, but he's a guy who'll go 4 for 7 from 3 the following night. So I think Phoenix is going to win, take control of the series. But I think Milwaukee is still going to get this thing to 6 or 7 games because, again, these are two flawed teams. I don't ever recall you have to go back a long ways, Jet, to see two teams in the finals with, I don't want to see less cachet. I mean, because there's a lot of great players here, but normally you've got like a truly all-time great player on there, right? Or an all-time franchise, right? You get the Lakers, the Celtics, the Golden State with Curry and KD and all these great matchups, or Shaq and Kobe going to all those finals. And there's always like these two mega teams. Here we have two organizations that have one title between them, 4 finals appearances between them. The freaking Bucks haven't been to the finals since 1974. Richard Nixon was in the White House the last time they were in the NBA finals. I was 11 years old. The last time Phoenix was in the finals, Bill Clinton was in his first year of his first administration. So yes. These aren't franchises with great histories. And even the players, I mean, Chris Paul, his 16th year is finally in the finals. Giannis, it's his 8th year, so I think you could show some patience with that. But, these aren't all-time teams, and they both needed a little bit of luck along the way. But you know what? They took advantage of that luck. I mean, I still think the Lakers would have beat Phoenix if they were healthy, and I think the Clippers would have beat Phoenix if they were healthy, and I think the Nets would have beat Milwaukee if they were healthy. That being said, these teams are what's left, and they deserve all the credit in the world for hanging in there.
They do. I think that's what makes it interesting is that it is two teams that are historically sort of downtrodden and not here. And as a basketball fan, I think that's great. And, to both of their credits, star players did play in the postseason. I know a lot missed, but Kevin Durant was healthy and they were bounced. LeBron, was not 100%, but he played against Phoenix. They lost.
He was out there. Yep.
Curry played in the playoffs, was bounced. So the historical franchises were there. The Celtics played. They didn't put up any sort of fight. The Lakers obviously were there. They didn't put up any sort of real fight after Anthony Davis went down. So, these teams it opened up great for them, but they deserve to be here. They were both excellent during the regular season. And I think I do still expect it, despite game 1 looking a little bit lopsided, to be a really, really competitive series. I will say Phoenix will win game 2. I agree with you, Sap, but I do think that Milwaukee will do what they did against Brooklyn and recover at home. So 5.5 is a spread, Sap, for Thursday's game. Are you going to take Phoenix with the points?
No, I'll take Milwaukee in the 5.5, again, based on the zigzag, because Phoenix covered last night. So in theory, with the zigzag, you take Milwaukee plus the points. I think we're looking at a really close game in game 2, but Phoenix finding a way at the end again, because when you get Chris Paul on the court, if it becomes a bucket game, I like Phoenix's chances. They'll get a better possession than, say, Milwaukee will. And just looking back at this series too, Jet, this would almost be like if the Chargers and Falcons met in the Super Bowl, right? Like you just say, well, these are kind of odd teams that, have never really been much of a factor. I mean, the Bucks do have the one championship, but it was 50 years ago with Lou Alcindor and Oscar Robertson, and Phoenix has had some nice teams over the years, but It's been 28 years since they've been in the finals. So yeah, this imagine next February we're looking at the Chargers and Falcons in the Super Bowl would be kind of like this is kind of strange, but that's the feel we get in this series.
Yeah, I think it's it's a great series for the sport. I really do. And I will take Phoenix with the 5.5 Sep. I just think Budenholzer is slow adjuster.
Mm-hmm.
I think by game 3 they will figure it out. Let's not let Chris Paul do whatever the hell he wants. But in game 2, I see a similar blueprint for the Suns. But we will see, and we will be here to react to the game on Friday after it takes place. So make sure you check us out on wherever podcasts are found. The Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Just type that right in. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/JetStryer. Check out our Twitters at JohnSap25 or at JetStryer. And we appreciate all the comments and everything you have for us. And we will make sure that we have you up to date with all the latest news and information NBA related. And I guess we'll give you some Euro updates too after the next game, Sap, too.
Sure, why not?
And if Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady decide to, play more golf against each other instead of football, we can update people on that too.
Maybe they'll bowl against each other.
Does it feel good, Sap, to know that Aaron Rodgers can only beat Tom Brady if it's on a golf course instead of a football field?
That's a low blow, Jet.
Yes, thank you. I know.
Well, he did beat him in 2014 at Lambeau.
No one remembers that.
Oh, I remember that. That was the year the Packers should have won the Super Bowl, but they couldn't recover an onside kick.
What coulda, woulda, shoulda, Sap.
I know. There's a lot of those when you're an Aaron Rodgers guy. I get it.
Yep. No, I hope Aaron Rodgers feels really good. He beat Tom Brady in golf. That's, quite an accomplishment. All right, Sap, that's going to do it for us. We appreciate everybody listening and checking us out, and we will be back on Friday. Thanks, everybody. See ya.